All right, so this is now the second video for this channel. This is the beginning of a series of videos talking about probably the primary impetus to my creating this channel. And this is going into a deeper dive into the concepts of masculinity and femininity. Specifically, this is going to be through the signs of the zodiac, largely because this will be a great demonstration as to why the definitions of masculine and feminine as understood to the ancients thousands of years ago fly in the face of how we view masculinity and femininity today. Like I said in a prior video, we tend to view masculine and feminine entirely by traits. This would be big muscles in a man, and a stiff upper lip is masculine. Emotional constipation is toxic masculine. And on the flip side, wearing a dress, being demure and pretty, and wearing makeup is feminine. While certainly a lot of those things could indicate masculinity or femininity, but in and of themselves they do not. The true definition of what is masculine and feminine is the concept of modality, an exchange of energy. Where does the energy originate? Where is it directed towards? And for the masculine component, energy starts within. It is developed from within. It is expressed outward. So it is an outward focused modality. Femininity is the opposite. It is inward focused. It focuses on energy that it can obtain from outside of itself. So while it's a feminine individual might be concerned of the environment and concerned and is hyper aware of the environment outside of it, they are so because they want to draw it inward. So it is inward focused. This is not well understood today. Modern understanding of these energies are actually the opposite. We tend to look at masculinity as inward focused and selfish, and femininity is outward focused and selfless. This is not true. Now, mind you, there is a selfish component for both, because in order to be masculine, you have to understand yourself and look within. That's the first component of learning to be masculine. So there is a selfish component, at least in terms of how we would understand something to be selfish. But it doesn't end there. It matures when it's able to take that energy, develop it, and then give it. Femininity is the exact opposite. The initial component is to be concerned about the world outside of itself, to see the condition of the world outside of itself, and even to care for the world outside of itself, which seems prominently selfless. But there's a reason why a feminine individual does that, is because they want to glean from that. They want to take from that. They want to get a reward from that. And this is not well understood in the modern era. But we will see these concepts play out as we develop the story of the signs. This series is not going to be entirely comprehensive. I'm not going to be giving a great deal of detail into each sign and to develop those in a 30-40 minute manner. That is not the purpose of this video. It is here for discussion purposes. It's to begin to think about these energies differently. It's to begin to think about the signs differently. We have a general idea of these signs that are sort of inconsequential. And I hope that as I develop this series, we can start to veer away from that and begin to understand these two energies the way the ancients once did, and to venerate them the way the ancients once did, rather than hand wave them the way we do today. So for those that understand, within astrology, the best way to look at astrology, or at least the zodiac, is the zodiac wheel. It starts with Aries, which is actually right here. If you have a wheel that goes like this, it starts at this point here and it goes counterclockwise. Aries is a masculine sign. It is considered to be the spark of life. This is the point in existence where you begin to exist. You come and stem from nothing and say, hey, here I am. Everything within Aries is defined by you. It is your identity. It is your appearance. It is how the rest of the world receives you. This is going to be somewhat contentious for some astrologers who hate to conflate signs and houses, but it's fairly undeniable that the subject matter of houses have a lot to do with the energies and purposes of the sign that they're associated with. Which is to say, the Aries being the first sign has a lot of similarities to the first house. The first house is your identity. It is your appearance. It is, it is defined inwardly by you. And then it's expressed outward. Aries is a sign that will go out and want to be on top. Why does it want to be on top? Because it wants you to recognize it. It is here to shine for you to a certain extent, and to make you aware of it. It wants to give to you what it has to offer. But what it has to offer is defined by it, not by you, not by what it's received, not by what it inherited, not by what it not by the environment around it, but rather entirely within the self. Aries is a very simple masculine sign because it's a fire sign. All of the fire energies are very active and they're very inwardly, not inwardly focused, but they start within the self. And so in terms of our traditional understanding of masculinity, which is sort of brashness and it's assertiveness, it's about putting your will and ambition out there. Aries is the easiest sign to look towards and say, that is definitively masculine and traditionally so as well. This is a planet that is ruled by Mars. Mars as a planet is about our ambition. It is about doing. It is about achieving. It's also the planet that rules war. And so we also tend to look at Aries as the sign associated with war. And war definitively because it's how you wage war is you fight it yourself. There's no attraction going on. The strength that you have to win and wage a war is developed from within, and it's expressed outwardly. Very basic, and it's very definitively masculine. There's not a lot of inheritance going on here. The second sign is the sign that we will instantly start to have problems when it comes down to understanding femininity. Because the earth signs, well, all three of them are feminine. This would be Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. They are active earth signs. This is not about what you receive from passive means, what you receive from active means. Tauruses are the signs that are primarily concerned with the material world and what you can glean from the material world, what you can get from the material world. You can think of it where Aries is sort of, hey, I exist and I want to revel in my existence. Taurus is the sign that first recognizes that there's actually a world outside of itself. And that world is fairly pretty. And that world can be enjoyed when you pull it into the self. The Taurus will look around and after we've gotten over the self, we've gotten over what we are, and we've gotten over what we can give, we start to realize, hey, there's a lot that we can take from the world. There's a tree. It has apples. How do I get the apple? Well, you climb it. You have to actively go up, do the work, right? Taurus is a sign of work. All of the earth signs are signs of work. And so you reach up, you pull in that apple, and you eat it. You take from outside, you pull from within through the eating action. Tauruses are signs that very stereotypically are the signs that are very stubborn. They're slow to move. So that would be your stiff upper lip if you ever had one within a Taurus. Tauruses aren't very emotional, but they have an emotional attachment to the material, and that's what makes them feminine. The house associated with this is the second house. The second house has a lot to do with our values. What do we care about? But our values are defined by what we care about outside of ourselves. This is the reason why money is associated with this house, currency associated with this house, because our currency is supposed to be a representation of that value. It's if you understand how currency is developed, it's supposed to be a very efficient means of bartering and trading. Rather than bartering and trading whatever item you can produce, it gets represented by a certain dollar value, currency value, and that's how you're able to create that exchange. But it's a representation of material value, of the world outside of the self. Tauruses do tend, because it's an active sign, they tend to take on a lot of the characteristics of what we would consider to be traditionally masculine. You can find a lot of Tauruses because they're very good at working. They're great providers because they have material wealth to provide. Part of the reason why they would have that material wealth and would provide in part with that material wealth is because they're getting something in return. A lot of Taurus men that I know are very wealthy, and they love their women, and they love to have their women, to covet their women. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case for everybody, but I've heard some ridiculous notions that a Taurus is warm and bubbly and they have a very wishy gooey heart. No, they don't. That's not an association of Taurus. There's other signs associated with that. The next sign in the zodiac is the sign Gemini. This is the third sign in the zodiac, and it has a lot of energies of the third house. Principal energy that we would probably talk about when it comes to Gemini is communicative ability. That communicative ability is something that's generated within yourself. You take your thoughts, you process them, you give it words, and then you express it outward. Masculine. It's a sign that's given by what's denoted by the twins, which is to say there's a passive component to Gemini and all of the air signs. This is partially why some of these air signs might actually look more traditionally feminine than necessarily masculine. And it's very often that the air signs are what trip us up when it comes down to traditional values of masculinity, because the air signs don't quite exhibit those signs. Rather, they process information internally as a means of response to anything that's given outside of itself. Someone communicates or exists on the outside of them. There's a person that you can communicate with. They say something to you. You hear the information. You quickly process it, and you respond. That give and take, is part of what makes this a passive sign. Because if there are no neighbors, if there's no one to speak to, there's no one to give to, right? So that's kind of what makes this seem maybe a little bit more feminine than you would think, but it's not feminine, it's masculine, but it has a passive component. It's about the neighborhoods that are around you, your local communities, your siblings. Again, it's known as the twin. You can see that with Taurus and Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. I did fail to mention that Taurus is ruled by Venus, and that's obviously the feminine form of Venus. We'll get to the masculine form of Venus later. With Mercury, it's a lower mind concept. Mercury rules the lower mind, your ability to process information. And this is because this is about a communicative ability. It's always about how you're able to express yourself to someone else. Someone else is able to receive your information, but that's not what makes it passive. You can already start to see something of the sort where how we understand masculinity and femininity starts to falter just with these two signs alone. We aren't talking necessarily about being able to take our traditional understanding of these two signs and then apply it to either. In fact, most people, if you think about these things enough, would actually consider Taurus to be traditionally masculine and Gemini to be traditionally feminine. And you'll continue to see this as time goes on. The final sign of this series, because I wanted to keep these just into 3 separate videos, is the sign of Cancer. Cancer is our first, firmly and traditional feminine sign. It is passive in its component. And of course it's receptive. Cancer is very stereotypically feminine, which is to say, it's associated with the 4th house, which is the house associated with the home. It's also the house associated with women. The purpose of this sign, the purpose even of the house, is to be receptive in quality. You go home to protect yourself from the environment outside of yourself. You are there you go home to rejuvenate. And how does your, home rejuvenate you? Well, actually, ironically enough, by you being mindful of the home. You have to clean the home. You have to give to the home. You have to, make sure that the home is cozy, that it can give to you. But in doing so, you are able to rest. You rest more than you give, which is part of again, this is how femininity works. You do give. There is an outward component to femininity. You are concerned about the world outside of yourself, but the reason why you do that is to receive more than you gave. When you have a clean home, when you have a peaceful home, when you have a home that has the capacity to give back to you, you are able to be rested. You are able to rejuvenate. You are able to be able to take that energy that you've taken in through your rest, through the food that you've eaten in the home, through the peacefulness of the home, and you're able to go back outside, with that energy that you've been able to retain within yourself, to restore within yourself. It's a very simplistic component. A lot of Cancerians, in particular, this is a sign that is associated with purity. It is purity from the world, protection from the world, and the Cancer is associated with trying to maintain that purity. And purity is a concept that's always been associated with femininity. This is, virgin purity. It's, cleanliness and purity. And also, just to know what happens. I mean, if you are spiritually focused, you are aware what happens when you do not take care of the home. Not only is it of a greater disruptive value, whether or not you care to believe this, but this is an esoteric channel, so we talk about these concepts. When you leave your home messy, dirty, when there are closets when you don't touch, where dust begins to collect and cobwebs and spiders start to kind of take the place, we know that there's a certain disquieting feeling in those areas, and those disquieted feelings usually are associated with ghosts and spirits and things that bump in the night. This is the reason why closets and underneath your bed are usually so scary to children, because those are usually the areas that aren't really kept clean. And so this is sort of an example of what happens when you don't care for your home, when you don't give it its proper attention, when you aren't aware of it and aware of the home outside of yourself. Then not only are you not able to give at that, or receive from that, instead something else occupies its space that starts to impede your ability to receive, a restful home, a restful experience. And I do believe at this stage in the game, you're starting to see this develop. You're starting to see this concept of the give and take a little bit. And more importantly, and I think this is the real aim of the series, is to start to understand, wait a minute, the way I've known traditional masculinity and traditional femininity don't quite apply to these signs. I can't think of Taurus as squishy. I can't think of Gemini as bulky and not caring of how it's received, right? And it's going to get more interesting as the series develops. In just a quick sneak peek, some of my favorite signs to talk about would be Libra. which would be the feminine or the masculine component of Venus. It's a very interesting sign because while it's masculine, it's probably one of the most traditionally effeminate signs in the zodiac. So too is the concept of Aquarius. Since we are going into the age of Aquarius, our understanding of that sign as a masculine sign is deeply and heavily misunderstood. So I think that will be enough for this component or this part in the series. Even though I did miss the receptive quality of the moon in Cancer, but that should be pretty obvious. I'll quickly say that the moon is obviously receptive because the moon has no form unless light is shone upon it. So, but that rules Cancer. But regardless, that's it for now. Again, I hope that this is generates some decent discussion. And I will be working on the following video, which would be Leo through Libra.